Hey, welcome. My name is Rachel Smith, and this is the Natural Health Rising podcast. I am a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and the owner of Natural Health Rising, which is my online holistic functional medicine company where I help people who have autoimmune diseases, chronic illnesses, mystery symptoms, and a whole host of other imbalances restore their health by natural means. On this podcast, you're going to hear conversations between myself and other health experts on functional medicine and general holistic health. My goal is to provide you with the tools you need in order to help you rise to your healthiest and happiest self.
So on this episode, I have Elizabeth Yarnell with me. Since being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 1999, Elizabeth has been on a mission to redefine multiple sclerosis and autoimmunity naturally as a traditional naturopath and certified LEAP therapist. She has worked with hundreds of MS and other autoimmune sufferers in her nationwide clinic using unique, personalized, non-pharmaceutical therapies to empower them to reclaim their health. She's a TEDx speaker, award-winning author whose cookbook has sold more than 70,000 copies, a patented inventor, and has been featured on CBS, NBC, ABC, and PBS, as well as Good Housekeeping, Health, Martha Stewart Living Radio, and many other outlets. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you, Rachel.
Yeah, happy to have you. Well, can you tell us a little bit about your story with multiple sclerosis and how that was discovered and what was that healing process like for you?
You know, I was going through my life like a normal person. I didn't have really any challenges that I knew about until one night in 1998 when I was 29 years old. 1999. I went to sleep as usual and I woke up the next morning blind in my right eye. It was crazy. I had been working on an article that I had been writing about cross-country skiing for the Denver Post the night before because one of my hats was as a freelance journalist. And before I had gone to bed, I had printed out my draft and given it a quick glance over as I was brushing my teeth and said, oh, I think I see 3 spots that I need to change a little bit, and then I'll be ready to submit to my editor. But the next morning when I woke up and I set those printed out pages next to my coffee, I couldn't even read them. It was like someone had taken an eraser and removed entire paragraphs and segments of the text. And what I could read, I really couldn't understand. When I was even able to make out any of the letters, obviously I couldn't figure out what were those edits that I had wanted to make. And I had to submit to my editor what I knew to be a substandard article because I didn't have anything else I could do about it. So in short order, I was in the eye doctor's office. He diagnosed me with optic neuritis, which means inflammation of the optic nerve. Which is a very common herald of multiple sclerosis. And in fact, later on, I was in an MRI, and that MRI showed very clearly there were 17 scars on my brain indicative of multiple sclerosis.
Oh, wow. That is a crazy story. So there were no symptoms that came up before the waking up with the eye?
You know, I had some symptoms in retrospect, but I wasn't able to identify them. One of the things about multiple sclerosis is that you need kind of multiple symptoms or multiple incidents to make that diagnosis, especially in the years before we had things like an MRI that can show us really what's going on in the brain. So it used to be that you could have some symptoms, but until you had multiple, you wouldn't ever receive that diagnosis. So I can look back and think, okay, 6 months before this, I had experienced tingling in my fingertips of one hand. It was like pins and needles, and I would just kind of touch it. It was really weird. But when I would ask doctors about it, they would say, it's not hindering you. Don't worry about it. That is a symptom of multiple sclerosis. And now I know that was my first symptom.
Okay. And just so other people are aware, if they're not familiar, can you explain what multiple sclerosis is?
So multiple sclerosis, or MS as it is better known, is a degenerative autoimmune disease that's characterized by chronic inflammation that damages the myelin sheaths around the nervous system. So our nerves, if you think of them, they're kind of like an electrical cord. So any electrical cord we have, even like the one that's in my computer right now, it's encased in a sheath of plastic. But in the olden days, if you remember, before we had these great plastic sheaths on our cords, cords would get frayed and broken. They still do sometimes. And inside that electrical sheath, we can see all sorts of wires, not just one wire, but numerous wires that are transmitting the electrical impulses through the wire from one side to the other side of the cord. And our nerves are the same way. They work by electricity that is transmitted through what we call synapses from our brain that sends out the message, and then it travels through our neural networks, our nerves, to end up to whatever it is we want to do, whether it's move our finger or move our mouths and say something, or even have a thought, or even breathe. It all comes through our nervous system. So the medical world does not believe that there is a what's called an etiology, or a basis for understanding why multiple sclerosis affects some people and not others, nor do they think that there's any way to cure it or recover from it. I personally do not agree with them on both fronts. And in fact, my next book is coming out in March, which is National MS Awareness Month. And it is about redefining multiple sclerosis and looking for triggers in places that we really haven't looked for them before, in a way to understand what autoimmunity really is.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. I love that analogy of the cord and the wires. That's really great. So you mentioned you don't agree with either of those statements. So let's start with one of them, which is what's the root causes of multiple sclerosis as we know it?
So the term autoimmunity is a generic umbrella term, and it basically means any condition that is characterized by chronic inflammation. So the word autoimmunity, if we take it apart, auto means self, and immunity means allergic. So autoimmunity really means, if we take it apart, allergic to self. I would say, evolution would say, nay, you cannot be allergic to yourself. That is impossible. You would not have survived this long. So I really think that autoimmunity, or this condition of chronic inflammation, is not just random, you're allergic to yourself, there's nothing you can do about it. There are actually triggers that we can identify once we start looking in the right places, and then remove them. It's kind of like celiac patients, which is another autoimmune disease. Once they figure out that gluten or wheat is their problem and is causing their symptoms, and they remove it, they can live a pretty normal life. They're probably never going to be able to reintroduce or to tolerate gluten, but you can live without it and not experience the symptoms. And I think that all autoimmune conditions have triggers. We just need to figure out what they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with you, because this is, I deal with autoimmune clients as well. So what are some of the major triggers you see with your clients? And yeah, just explain those a little bit more.
So there are a couple of factors in this. One is to recognize that chronic inflammation causes damage to the digestive tract. And 80% or more of our immunity is based in our digestive tract. So when there is damage done in the digestive tract, a number of things start to happen. One, we have undigested or incomplete digested food, which can lead to deficiencies as it moves further into the body. We also have what's called leaky gut or intestinal permeability, because that inflammation affects the cells that make up the stomach and bowels. And these cells need to be really tightly paved, kind of like the the tiles on a bathroom floor, because they need to be watertight as they hold your food in it as it gets digested. And when there's inflammation, those cells swell up. Those cells swell, that was a tongue twister. Those cells swell up, and now we have gaps in between them where undigested food particles can slip through and cause more inflammation in the body. So that's one factor, is the damage to the gut that we have to recognize. Another factor, I think, are the amount of toxins that are in our world. I think our food supply has been contaminated. And in fact, I gave a TEDx talk about this in 2014 called Poisons in Our Everyday Foods. But I think that people become overloaded with toxins. And this can come from things like artificial sweeteners, artificial flavors, artificial fragrances. These are all chemicals. And the human body evolved on this planet to deal with things that were on this planet, not things that were sourced from miles below the surface, like petroleum-based chemicals, which are in our food dyes and our food flavors, all sorts of things. But also, we are bombarded at a rate never before seen in the history of humankind with these chemicals and these toxins. In fact, the Environmental Working Group did a study a number of years ago where they tested the cord blood of newborn babies the second they came into this world, and they tested that, and they found that the average newborn across the country already has more than 200 toxins and chemicals in their bloodstream at the moment of birth. It's almost like we're set up to fail in some ways. So once we reach a threshold of toxins, we can tip over into autoimmunity, into constant inflammation. So I think that toxins play a big factor. And then the third thing I think is a big factor is hidden parasitic infestation. And I think parasites are way more of a problem than we have been led to believe, and that we widely acknowledge in our world, even in what we consider to be such a developed environment as the US. Parasites are everywhere. The CDC estimates that 7 out of 10 adults are carrying around parasites, and the job of a parasite is to find a host and move in and set up residence, reproduce forevermore, lots and lots of generations. And unless you address the parasites directly, they're never going to go away. And they cause chronic inflammation because they're foreign invaders into this pristine environment that we call the human body. And our immune system does not like foreign invaders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you check with testing to see if your clients have parasites?
You know, unfortunately, testing for parasites is notorious for false negatives for a number of reasons. One is that, again, our doctors aren't really trained in parasites. We don't really look for them very well. So if you're not looking for something, then you may not find it. Number two is the common way to test for parasites is through a stool sample, but not all parasites live in our bowels or emerge with our stool. Some parasites live in our liver, like liver flukes. Some live in our heart, like trichinosis. Some live in our brain, like T. gondii. Some live in our bloodstream, like Chagas. So we could spend all this time and money waiting around for test results and have them come back negative, and they'd be false negatives. So I don't even bother to test. I think if you have a chronic inflammatory condition, it's worth doing an herbal, very, very gentle herbal parasite protocol just to clear the playing field. And let's start, if you're going to start all sorts of changes, let's at least give you a good fighting chance to have a good effect.
Mm-hmm. And how long does someone have to stay on a herbal parasitic protocol?
So the protocol that I use, which is a combination of 4 different herbs, very, very gentle. I use the same thing for babies when their moms find worms in their diapers, all the way up to adults. Each of the herbs is separate, so you kind of crescendo them over the course of 30 days. It's a 30-day protocol. That way you cover any parasitic activity that might be related to the lunar cycle, which parasites are lunar creatures oftentimes. So it kind of covers all of your bases.
Okay, awesome. Are there other common symptoms of parasites that someone would want to look out for?
I think the most common symptom of parasitic infection would be the beginning, the acute phase of infection. So oftentimes, right when you're infected, your body will rebel and you might have diarrhea, you might have vomiting, you might feel malaise, you might even call it, oh, I had a stomach bug or a 24-hour flu or food poisoning. I call it that too. So that's the most common initial phase of parasitic infection. And then your body kind of settles down and you move into a chronic phase of lowered vitality, though you may not even recognize that because your vitality is so lowered that until you clear out the parasites and realize how much more energy and life you have in your body, you might not even realize what a lower frequency you were living at for so long because of this infection. But during that chronic phase, symptoms can be varied. You could have diarrhea, you could have constipation, you could fluctuate between the two. You could poop 3-6 times a day or once every week. Both of those can be symptoms of parasitic activity. Some people, my husband, for example, when he's infected with parasites, he faints randomly. So all of a sudden, I remember one night we were sitting on the couch watching TV and he got up to go to the fridge to get a drink. And all of a sudden I hear this thump, thump, thump. And I walk into the kitchen and he's literally flat on his back. The fridge door's open. He had just completely fainted. For him too, he would have sporadic vomiting, especially when he ate dairy. Parasites can get really active with dairy and sometimes sugar as well. So sometimes parasites can show up in symptoms as like headaches, or a very common symptom might be waking up around 3 a.m. That's a active time for parasites. So if you find that every morning you wake up and look at your clock, it's 3 a.m, that might be an indication that you're infected.
Yeah. Okay. So where are these parasites coming from?
It is super, super easy to pick up parasites. You can get them from swimming in a lake or a river or even a public pool that's chlorinated. Every summer I see on the news that this water park just got tested for Giardia, something like that. You can get them from playing with your pet, from cleaning up the kitty litter box, from eating fruits or vegetables that haven't been washed that well. Once I picked up parasites from a salad bar at a Pizza Hut in Trinidad, Colorado. You can get them from walking barefoot. There's Strongolides is a parasite in Brazil. They call it bicho de pé, which means a bite on the foot because it comes up through your feet as you're walking barefoot. And they used to be just seen in the tropics. Now they recently have been seen in the border areas of Texas. You can get them from being bitten by a tick or a mosquito or another vector that can deliver them into your bloodstream. Lyme disease is a parasite, Babesia. So there's lots of ways to pick up parasites. Certainly foreign travel and less than sterile food and drink can contribute, but not always. You do not have to have left home to pick up a parasite. Oh, sushi, let's not forget raw fish. And undercooked pork as well.
So that's a lot of places. And people are probably thinking, oh my gosh, I'm scared of everything right now. What would you have to say to people like, okay, what if someone wants to go outside barefoot or eat some fresh fruit? Like, how do we stay up with mitigating the effects of living a normal life and potentially getting a parasite?
And I love to ground myself and walk barefoot. So when you're walking outside barefoot, you want to stay away from like swampy areas. I know in Texas, part of the problem is they're kind of having leaking sewage. into like grasses and pipes. I know it's very popular now to use gray water to irrigate things like playing fields. I wouldn't walk barefoot on those. In your own yard, it's probably safer as long as you're not having a leaking septic tank or something like that. Really, I think the best way to protect ourselves is just to practice regular good hygiene, washing your hands before you eat or touch your face and after you use the bathroom. Don't touch things like door handles on public bathrooms as you exit. You may pick something up on your hands and now you've got it to bring into you. Certainly, if you're changing babies' diapers, things like that, just be very hygienic and sanitary with all of these day-to-day activities. And if you still feel like you pick up a parasite, which you might, right? They happen, they're all the time, they're everywhere. That might be an indication that it's time to do an herbal cleanse.
Okay. So how long did it take you to heal from your multiple sclerosis?
So I think the healing process is a lifetime journey. I think that the doctors probably are right that there is no cure for multiple sclerosis or really any other autoimmune condition. What you need to learn how to do is how to clean up your body and manage your life and lifestyle so that you don't trigger those inflammatory conditions. So it took me the first 3 to 5 years, I was on and off one of the injectable multiple sclerosis disease modifying therapies, which is a very, very toxic pharmaceutical. And I had terrible side effects from those, including hives all over my body. A good day was 30 hives, a bad day was 300 hives. For 3 years, every single day I had hives somewhere. And it turned out it was really from the drug that I was taking to try to slow down the progression of the multiple sclerosis. It wasn't working really at all. I was still having regular, they're called exacerbations or flare-ups of symptoms from multiple sclerosis while I was on the drug. But I was learning a lot about, and I was starting to clean up my body and my diet and my life and change the way I eat and the way I lived and the other environmental influences around me. And by the time I stopped taking the drug completely, which was probably, I think 2004 was the last time I tried it, it was making me have a seizure every time I injected. And I thought, you know what? My body is trying to tell me very clearly it does not want this drug. And I felt like at that point that I had learned so much about what multiple sclerosis was and what these kinds of triggers were and how to clean up my diet that I would fare better without the drug. And in fact, I have. My last exacerbation was 2002. So I can't remember what your original question was.
Oh, just how long it took you to heal. What is a common timeline? I know this looks different for everybody, but if someone works with you, how long does it take somebody to put their MS into remission?
So my foundational program is a 4-month program. And by the end of those 4 months, people understand, they have a handle on what they need to do, how they need to eat, how they need to live in order to keep their multiple sclerosis in remission. It doesn't take the whole 4 months. By the end of the 4 months, you pretty much have it down pat. Really within the first month or two, people experience tremendous improvement and cessation. I say you're going to experience reduction or even complete cessation of your symptoms unless you trigger them. I can trigger my symptoms pretty easily, unfortunately. But I stay away from those things that trigger them.
Yep. Same thing here with my Hashimoto's. I know what to do and what not to do. And you just kind of learn what works for your body at that point.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Just recently, I accidentally ate something that had natural flavors in it. For example, natural flavors are not natural. Everyone who is listening to this or who follows Rachel should probably already know this. But if something says natural flavors on it, that is very, very toxic, and it is an FDA loophole that can conceal 30 chemicals that are in those quote natural flavors. There's nothing natural about them. And for me, when I have natural flavors, different things might happen depending on which one they are. So if I drink, say, a carbonated flavored water with natural flavors, those things seem so great, right? No calories, just a little flavor and just water. Oh my gosh. The first thing that will happen is my eyelids will start to get really red, and then they will start to peel and bleed from
Oh,
natural
wow.
flavors. The other night, I ate something I did not know had a natural flavor in it. And one particular natural flavor, I don't even know which one it is, wakes me at 4 a.m. with shooting pains down my legs, which is an MS symptom,
Mhm.
which and can also be termed restless leg syndrome, right? Where nothing I could do could release the pain that was in my legs. No stretching, no movement, nothing, because it was a chemical reaction to of inflammation to these natural flavors.
Mhm.
I have a secret remedy that I'd love to share with you. It's a homeopathic remedy. It's a homeopathic antihistamine, and
Mm.
so I take that, and that works pretty quickly to relieve the pain and the inflammation. Because again, we have to think, if we have a poison ivy encounter or a bee sting, and we take something like Benadryl, which is an antihistamine, we can expect to get some relief from the pain from those symptoms, which are inflammation. Um, so by taking a homeopathic antihistamine, I can get relief from some of these symptoms that we call multiple sclerosis symptoms, which proves my theory that really it's all hypersensitivity reactions. You're not allergic to yourself.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you want to share the name of the homeopathic remedy?
It's called homeopathic antihistamine,
Oh, okay.
histamantium.
Okay.
Yep. And you can purchase it on my shop page. I ship it anywhere. I give it as part of my welcome kit to everyone who works with me, because I want you to recognize, I want everyone to see, like, wow, this is homeopathy. And if you have never been introduced to homeopathy before, this is a great way to learn about it, because really the effects are almost immediate.
Mhm. Yeah, I think homeopathic medicine is absolutely crazy when you think about it. For somebody who doesn't know, what is the basis of how a homeopathic remedy works?
A homeopathic remedy is based on the concept that like cures like, which is maybe more than you need to know about homeopathy. It was discovered and codified by Samuel Hahnemann back in the 1800s and has been used for a century. And it's very widely used in Europe. It used to be used very widely the United States as well, before the publication of the Flexner Report in around 1910, which demonized any medical practices that were not based on petroleum, as per Andrew Carnegie and J.D. Rockefeller. So the only reason homeopathy is not more widely known about here is because of the oil barons, J.D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie, who really put the kibosh on things. But homeopathic remedies are safe. If they're not the right remedy, nothing will happen. There are no side effects from homeopathic remedies. They're safe really for anyone to use, even pregnant women.
Hmm. Awesome. Yeah. I think a lot of people think that they hear the word homeopathy and they just think, oh, like natural herbs. But it's actually this almost like a sugar pill in a sense that has such a minute amount of the ingredient that your body needs to combat that symptom. So yeah, just want to clear
Exactly.
that up so people know that part.
You are right. And some of them are sourced from herbs, but whatever the original ingredient is, it has been diluted hundreds of thousands of times. And it's really all that is left is the energy signature.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So even like arnica, or not arnica, arsenica, which is a very common homeopathic remedy for a stomach upset, has arsenic as its foundation, but there's only the energy signature left because it has been diluted so many times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So crazy.
It is crazy. I'm not the best qualified person to explain how it works, but it does work. And there are no side effects and no downsides to trying it because if it's not the right remedy, nothing will happen.
Mm-hmm. So what are some other things that people should do? Maybe like top 2 to 3 things that people should do to reduce inflammation or start to work on their autoimmune issue?
So I think that there are a couple things to do. If you can remove your parasites, that's a great way to start. But you can also do a detox type practice and remove some of the toxins and heavy metals from your body. My favorite way to do that is through an ionic foot bath, which is super gentle and no side effects, and you don't have to take any questionable herbs or use any chelating binders, anything like that. In fact, I have a course called Autoimmune Detox Therapy, and if you go to autoimmunedetoxtherapy.com, you can see I kind of lay it all out how that works. But in 30 days, you can remove tremendous amounts of heavy metals and other toxins from your body, and that can give you a really noticeable change in how you feel. Where I love using it is on elderly people, because if their mind is starting to wander, odds are high they have an accumulation of heavy metals in their body after a lifetime of living in an industrialized world and taking pharmaceuticals and vaccines and all kinds of ways, breathing them in. If you live in a city, every time you leave your house, you're breathing in particulates from our traffic and our industry. So it's a nice, very, very gentle, low effort way to detox. You don't have to change your diet. You don't have to do a juice fast or anything like that to do that. But so yes, you can detox your body is a great thing to do. But the biggest and number one thing I always advocate is to start reading labels. If there are ingredients on a label that you cannot pronounce, you probably shouldn't be eating it. Watch out. As I said, our food supply is contaminated, and the FDA, their job is not to protect the consumer. Their job is to protect American industry. So they're not out there looking out for you, especially in all of the amounts that we're being exposed to all of these chemicals and additives that are in our food supply. So for instance, food dyes and colors originally were brought before the FDA in the 1930s. And at that time, they were sourced from coal. Now they're sourced from petroleum. And really, there really haven't been good studies that have been done long term that assess what they could be doing to us and the amounts that we are taking them in. And you have to remember that these are not just coming in through our mouths, through what we eat. So like every time we have, say, like a Diet Coke, and there's aspartame, and there's caramel color, and there's artificial flavors, all of these things just in that one can. But our skin is our largest organ, and we absorb molecules to our skin too. So we have to look at, well, why are we putting green food dye in our dishwashing liquid? Why is our toothpaste blue? right? Why is our shampoo a different color? It makes no sense that we would color these items that are meant to be cleaners. But we can absorb all these things in through our skin, and that adds to our toxic load.
What about nutrition? I know you use you're a LEAP therapist, which uses the MRT food sensitivity test, correct?
That is correct.
Can you tell us more about how that works?
So the MRT is a unique food sensitivity test. Most of the food sensitivity tests on the market, and you may have seen some advertised even on television lately, are looking for antibody creation. But antibody creation is somewhat irrelevant when we're talking about food sensitivities versus food allergies. Yes, there will be antibodies created for food allergies, but if you have a food allergy to, say, shrimp, and it gives you anaphylaxis, you might already know that or have figured that part out. And certainly you don't want to eat shrimp if that is the case. But we're talking about food sensitivities that cause inflammation, not necessarily anaphylaxis and death. And that inflammation can manifest in a myriad of ways, really anywhere. I like to look at and say most, if not all, symptoms are due to inflammation. So if we think, well, inflammation in the head, that could be a migraine or a headache or even brain fog or depression. Inflammation in the sinuses could be chronic sinusitis or lots of sinus infections or runny or stuffy noses. Inflammation in our chest could be asthma, could be high blood pressure, could be heart issues. Inflammation in our gut could look like digestive issues, could look like bloating, could look like cramping, inflammation, gas. Inflammation in our bowels could look like diarrhea or constipation or both, or swinging back and forth between the two. Inflammation in our joints could look like fibromyalgia or arthritis, right? Anything that ends in an itis means inflammation in doctor speak. Like, remember, I had optic neuritis, inflammation of the optic nerve, gastritis, inflammation of the gastric cavity. Really, those are just explanations, descriptions of what's going on. They don't tell you how it happened or how to get it, how to fix it, how to treat it. So the MRT is amazing because it measures the inflammatory mediators that are released by the blood upon exposure to what it deems to be a threat. So those mediators, just like we talked about histamine and antihistamines earlier, but histamine is only one of 80 or more mediators that the bloodstream can release that can trigger inflammation within the body. So the MRT doesn't distinguish between which mediator is being released because we know that all mediators cause inflammation systemically. They travel through the bloodstream, so everywhere in the body. And when you're inflamed, it affects how you think. It affects your emotions, your reactions as well, because those mediators go everywhere the bloodstream goes. So the MRT is super accurate. I think it's like 94% accuracy, which is astounding in the world of testing. And it allows us to design a customized anti-inflammatory diet that is not an elimination diet. So we're not going to look at the test results and say A, B, and C turned up high on the list. Why don't you just avoid those and go live your life, which is not super helpful. Instead, we look at X, Y, and Z are the least inflammatory foods for you that we can see from this test. And we're going to design a diet around the least inflammatory foods so that you can have things to eat that are delicious and fulfilling and not feel deprived, but not be inflaming yourself every time you open your mouth to put food in it.
Mm-hmm. And do these people heal these food sensitivities after a while?
So food sensitivities absolutely can change. My son, when we first did his MRT test when he was 6 years old, he had 1/3 of the items on the test that were reactive for him, which is still to this day the worst test I've ever seen. But when we retested him 7 years later, only about 12 items came up as reactive form, and not even all the same as ones that had been on the first test. So some things he had been able to recover from and was no longer reactive to, and other things stayed and he was still reactive to them. And then new ones came onto the list as well. So yes, the makeup of your tolerance threshold absolutely changes with your activity and how you manage your body. And the longer you can remain uninflamed, the more healing that will happen to your gut.
Mm-hmm. How often should somebody, or would it be recommended for somebody to do this test?
Typically, I find people don't really need to retest for like 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
And in fact, I have, I don't see very many people who need to retest more frequently than that. But after around 6 or 7 years, enough maybe will have changed. And if you find yourself struggling to stay in an uninflamed place using the tools that we identified while you were going through the program, then it might be a good idea to retest, but it's very rare.
Okay. So these people stay off of those foods for years?
The test company suggests that you refrain completely from eating anything or becoming exposed to anything that is in what they call the yellow zone for 3 months, and anything that's in the red zone for 6 months. I don't think that is sufficient. I usually recommend stay away from anything that's in the yellow zone for 6 months and anything that's in the red zone for a year at least. And then part of the program is I'll teach you how to challenge yourself. So if it's something that you're dying to reintroduce, you may be able to, you'll be able to challenge yourself. That's the best way to know. And you may have a reaction. And part of the strategy of challenging yourself is to choose your time and place and make sure that it is the only new variable. So that is a big part of the process, is we want to reduce the variables that could be triggering your symptoms. And if we can know that everything else has been deemed safe for you, and there's just one new item and you have a new symptom manifest, then you can track it back to that new item and know that it affects you, just like me with the restless leg from the natural flavors.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you have any tips for making nutrition changes easier for someone who is trying to change from like a standard American diet to all of a sudden eating non-processed, anti-inflammatory?
Very much so. In fact, this was a big part of my journey. Was I wanted to find a way that I could eat healthier, that didn't take a lot of effort, because I have multiple sclerosis and fatigue is a hallmark of that condition. But I wanted to focus more on whole foods than processed foods. So if we look more at whole foods, they don't have all of those additives and contaminants that are added to our processed foods. So in fact, you can see on the wall behind me, my cookbook, Glorious One Pot Meals. It introduces and teaches the unique method of preparing whole foods in a cast iron Dutch oven. I just happen to have one here. Let me pull this out. Oh, like this one. Makes it super, super quick and easy to do, so that you literally throw your foods into the pot and throw it into a super, super hot oven and flash cook it so that dinner's ready in 45 minutes. Makes it very, very easy. So that is Glorious One Pot Meals back there.
Okay, awesome. That's super helpful because, yeah, the whole prep and everything like that and cooking is the biggest challenge I see for a lot of people.
I would agree. In fact, if people are interested, they can pick up my ultimate checklist for stocking your freezer and pantry with foods, with whole foods, to make it really, really easy to throw together a healthy dinner any night of the week. And you can get that at Glorious, Glorious, 1 pot, P-O-T, meals.com. And you can grab that checklist there.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes.
Thank you.
So, final question. If you could leave the listeners with one tip that they could implement maybe this week or today even that could help them live a healthier, happier life, what would that be?
I think the biggest tip is to read the labels and focus on whole foods more than processed foods. I do have a handout that is the three foods that people with multiple sclerosis or other autoimmune conditions should never eat. And you can pick that up at multiplesclerosisdiet.com if you want to pick that up. But really, the secret is stay away from the chemicals, stay away from the artificial things, and focus on whole foods rather than processed foods.
Yeah, I totally agree. So we have all your links in the show notes for your, how to reach out to you and everything like that. Do you have a preferred place that people reach out to you if they have more questions or want to work with you?
The best way to reach me is through my website at elizabethyarnell.com. And on the bottom of every page, there's a link to book a complimentary naturopathic health assessment with me. And I invite all the listeners of this program to take me up on that. Let's chat. Let's see if what I offer could help you feel better.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Rachel, for having me.
Thanks for watching the episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure that you like the video and leave a comment and share it with a friend who really needs to hear it. Because when you share this information, you're also going to help other people level up their health. And if you or somebody else you know wants to work on their health and they're looking for a functional medicine practitioner, feel free to reach out to me to apply to work together. Thanks for watching and keep striving to become your healthiest, happiest self.